We'll give it a minute or two to get started. So tonight we're going to be continuing on and doing on the Cool Cube. And just if you haven't been here the last 2 weeks, this is the pattern I wrote back a few years ago. Call it the Cool Cube. Um, this was the first one I ever made that I used to develop the pattern. This really cool dragon bag. So you can tell I'm a dragon fan. But this is the one that sparked the idea in the first place, because I was striking some fabric from a company called Backstitch, and they had Lego Mario. And of course, if you Lego, you think blocky. So I was like, well, I want to make a bag that looks like a block, so I can make a mystery block. So this was the what sparked the initial pattern. I said fully lined and bound. And we are going to continue on. The past 2 weeks, we have put together our main panel and interfaced or prepped all of our materials to make our front panel. And then last week, we completed the body of the bag. Y'all got to see me struggle with my needles breaking twice last week. But here is the main body of the bag. So if we were to actually fold it at the seams, and I know it's kind of floppy right now, but once you actually attach your top, it does go a lot better. It actually lines up like it should. Trying to figure out where my little stapler was. Right, never mind. Right here. So, of course, we have our little zipper pulls because our zipper is all put together in the seam right here. But this is the front. So you have the front seam right there. So that is the front of our bag. Then we have each side and the back. And I have what we're going to put on today is the top. And I do have the corners rounded. And that is because even though this is a square, it is easier to sew and make the curves with the rounded corners. It doesn't mean we won't trim off some excess. But last week, one thing I said to make sure you do is you mark your centers, top and bottom, both on the zipper tape and on your main fabric. Should have it on top and bottom. And also, if you didn't do it beforehand, you mark the centers on all four sides of your top. Thank you, Melody. So right now my fabric is right side out and upside down apparently. But so what we need to do to actually sew this together is we're going to flip it inside out. Okay. So the biggest thing that you need to do, if your material is directional, in my case, if you can see, I have some going this way, some going this way, some going that way, and some going that way. So it's just whatever, like you can see Maleficent's are actually right side up. So if you have a directional print, hi Marlene. If you have a directional print, the biggest thing is matching up at your back. Your back is the part without the zipper. And so the best way I say to make sure that it's the way you want. So just like how I had this question block, I wanted it, when I looked at it, this to be the top. I made sure when I attached it at the back that the top matched up with the back if it's directional. If it's not directional, doesn't really matter which is the top and bottom, but if it is directional, the top should be the back of the bag, of the main part of the bag. But like I said, this print is non-directional. So I just need to look at my print and say, what do I want to be the top? And so I just kind of have to take into account what my daughter likes. And so I'm going to make sure that Merida is right side up. So since this is what I'm considering my top, this is the cool cube. This is my pattern that I came up with. We have been working on this last couple of weeks. This is the original one that I came up with the pattern for, or at least the original one I put together. And the reason I made this pattern was to make a Lego Mario themed cube, but I have probably made somewhere around 30 to 50 cubes in the last few years for customers and the like. I also have in my now we'll do this again. I have made clear vinyl cubes. I have different size cubes. This is the medium. This is the small. So if you just want to see the difference, and if you were to stack them all on top of each other, you can see they will actually all fit inside of each other. So just so you can see, I'll open this one and you see it drops down side of it. And the little one fits inside the medium one as well. So right now we are going to connect our top. That's right. This is not really, I don't call it directional because not one side's not the right side or not, but you just have to figure out what you want to be right side up. So since I have Merida as what I want as the top, I'm going to put right sides together, matching my center marks. So I've got my center mark here and my center mark back here, and make sure they're lined up. And I'm going to clip them together. Now I'm going to do that for all four of my center marks. And then I will go and add some more clips. Now I will tell you that a lot of times I will use high char. Clips. I will also use, a lot of times I will use staples. I'm actually going to use staples once I get the clips holding the main 4 points in place, because staples don't move, clips can. And I use them in, when I do the staples, I do them in the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance so that they're not in my way. And then I pull them out once I'm done actually sewing it together. So I am going to, I've got my little handy dandy little hand stapler. I don't use tons of staples. I just use enough to keep it together, just so it doesn't shift on me. And these are not permanent, so you don't have to worry about that. Like I said, I just use it to kind of keep it from the fabrics from shifting on me. It's like between 4 or 5 staples on each side. You can use as many or as little, or you can use just clips. And I do use clips just sometimes. Um, but I also like to have it, it's just, sometimes it's easier just to go ahead and do the staples. And you don't want to staple every inch of it, because then you got to take it all. But it is a little 10 Holtz stapler. I'm just stapling around real quick. And then we will take it to the machine after I show you what it looks like, put kind of held in place. I love my little Tim Holtz because it has itty bitty tiny staples and it gets into those tight spaces very easily. I use that actually usually in most of my bag construction. And we are not going to complete the bag today. We will get through the top and hopefully get through adding the handle depending on what time it is. That's my goal. If not, we will continue the handle next week. That's actually probably one of the easiest parts of the bag, at least to me. But especially since we're not making the handle, we're using webbing. All right, so we have our last staple that I'm going to put in. And as you see, I am leaving my clips on at my centers. Just kind of, it helps me know where I'm at as far as sewing the bag. All right, just to show you. So this is kind of stapled in place. You can see my little staples kind of poking through there. Excuse me. Okay. When I start sewing the bag, I always start sewing at the back because you're not having to deal with the zipper here. So we will actually sew all the way around, starting at the back, and we will get to the other side, and then we will put our binding on. So I'm going to move the camera back over to the sewing machine. Okay. So this is one reason. So if you see, I will actually fold down part of my bag so it lays nice and flat. And one reason I do that is so that it's out of my way. So we are going to go and we are sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And don't worry about going too fast or too slow, especially when you're going around these corners. Take your time. We are going around this current corner. Okay, and see, I will actually push down parts of the bag as I go around them, just to make it a little easier for sewing it. So you'll see me adjust things as I go around constantly. Like I said, just take your time. In a way, this is one of the more difficult parts is with this zipper because it likes to move. And because it's not a firm piece, it doesn't have the interfacing that the rest of the body does. So, like the bottom, in some ways, even though it's a little thicker, because you're going through double layers of everything for all parts, it is not as fiddly as the zipper tape. So, you will have some overlap. And when you get to an especially thick part, sometimes it likes to make noise. Okay, going around this corner. Okay. Now I'm actually going to go back around that corner in a minute after we get all the way around because it have a couple skip stitches and I don't want to have any loose parts. But at the moment, it's just getting through the bag, getting it all attached first. A lot of times I will double check. I haven't had any skip stitches or anything like that, especially around those corners, which is the thickest part. Sometimes you will get skip stitches. Like I said, you are going to, if your zipper tape does not exactly line up with your materials, don't let that fret because you're going to trim off any excess before you put your binding on. Okay, so as you can see, I kind of fold it out of my way as I get to the next part. Moving my zippers down a little bit so I can go around that corner without them being in my way. And once we get past the corner, I'm actually going to take my zipper pulls and go back to the part we've already done. We just take our time, making sure that your zipper tape is what stays at the 1/4 inch seam allowance, trying to make it as close to the edge as possible, but it may not be exact. And like I said, even in my instructions, I say you will probably have excess material outside of your zipper tape. I said, we just take our time going around the curve. You just don't want your zipper tape bunched up because that will affect how your bag will zip closed. Okay. So we can see I'm almost up to the it can be very fiddly around corners. So since I'm up to the zipper right up to the zipper holes, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift up my presser foot and I am going to turn this to the side a little bit and move my zipper pulls back past my presser foot. I will pull both zipper pulls past that presser foot. And so this is a lot of fiddliness. So I'll actually go ahead and push them down around the corner just to get them out of the way. That's why you make sure your needle is in good so that you can rotate it. And just so you can see, my zipper pulls are now gone. Make sure you put that presser foot down. But just to show you, there are my zipper pulls back where we've already sewn. Hi, Nicole. So we are continuing sewing our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as I said, most of my patterns, with the exception being the Gamer's Night Out wallet, which I will, um, with the release of the new Switch 2 coming out, I will do a new tutorial for that on the YouTube channel. And I hope to have a add-on to account for the new Switch 2 size once I have the system in hand. But that's not till June, so we got a little bit till then. Like I said, we're going around the corner. Like I said, it looks like I'm manhandling this cube as I go around, but it's the best way to make sure that your zipper tape is laying flat. You're not going to have any weird puckers or anything like that because you can see what you're doing. And this is one that you need to make sure that when you do put staples in, they are inside your seam allowance. Like I said, I usually put them in about 1/8 of an inch from the edge because they're not going to get caught up in the stitching and possibly break a needle or anything like that. So we're getting close to that other corner, that last corner. We've gone around 3 corners now. I told you we're going to go back and I saw some like 2 or 3 skip stitches. So we're going to go back and sew that at that first corner again. That's just because right here where the zipper tape joins the material, it's a lot thicker. So sometimes you will get some skip stitches if you don't have like what's called a hump jumper. And I do not, but most of the time I do not need it. But just heads up, if you are going between different depths of materials, you will run into that from time to time. And we're squishing down our corners. Okay. And we are going around, continuing to sew at our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I see a couple stitches over here. And one way to do that is fix it is just to rotate the bag without taking the needle out. I'm going to go backwards a little bit, just flattening it. I've never used a hump chipper. I don't even own one. So probably should invest in one. And if you're wondering what I'm doing, basically, since a skip stitch means it's not all the way down, basically I'm just reinforcing it, basically kind of like doing a reverse stitch here over that part. Okay, so that we don't have any skip stitches. And all this is to do is just give you some extra stitching so that it's very sturdy. And so I have a couple slip stitches on this first corner. So I'm going to go around that last little bit right here one more time. And you could take it out and just go over where you have the skip stitches, but sometimes it's just easier just to do an extra row of stitching. It's not going to hurt your bag. It'll make it a little more strong. And this is at a stress point for where you're unzipping and zipping your bag. See, it's going through it no problem this time. And sometimes it's just that first time you go around that curve because you're trying to flatten it out, it gives you troubles. And see, it stitched it no problem that time. Okay, just to show you, and I'm going to go do this on all my corners. If you see there's an excess of vinyl hanging over from the side, from the top, I'm going to go around all 4 corners and trim this. I'm also going to use my little handy dandy staple remover to take out all my staples. Just so you're not hearing me just do that as I will move the camera back and we will trim off the excess of all 4 corners. And there usually is a little bit of excess though. When I say there's a little bit, it's not a lot. Some corners have more than others and some have next to none. So it just depends. So that I'm going to trim off the excess. And this is just so that your binding will lay flat. And I do this before I remove my staples. Okay, 2 more corners. There's nothing wrong, especially since these stitches are not going to show. This is more for construction. Nobody's going to know that you went over a stitch more than once. Okay, we have one last corner to trim off. And like I said, every corner usually is about like that. If you look above, maybe about 1/8 of an inch around. Follow the curve of your zipper tape and trim off the excess. So now I'm going to use my little handy dandy staple remover and remove all of these staples. Of course, when they want to come out. Now I do have, I don't know what, a little magnetic thing I use for staples. As you can see, my little collection that I drop them onto as I pull them out. Most of the time, anyways. That's a little magnet from Dritz. So, but I've got about 16 staples to pull out. Not tons, but enough that it takes a few minutes. But I just pull them out. Now, you could put this in your binding, but I'm going to tell you there's a chance you could hit it once you are sewing your binding closed. So I don't recommend it. So I usually take them out. There are some bags that you actually trim off the excess, not in the case that you have zipper tape, but trim off excess fabric and you can just trim off your extra, the staples out of them. But that doesn't always work. So in this case, you need to take them out. Just there's a chance you could hit them when we're sewing our binding closed. Now, you can use pre-made binding. I use what I say in the pattern, which a 1.5 inch wide strip by the width of your fabric. And it can be, and I'm usually, when I say by width of fabric, unless I say it's for a longer fabric, it needs to be I usually go by quilting cotton length. You will have extra at the end, but that means you have more than enough. You can use pre-made binding tape. I do that as well, but a lot of times I like for it to blend and be exactly what is the same on the inside. Case in point, the Mario. You can't hardly tell that I have binding because it blends in so much because it's made of the same fabric. I do not normally cut that on the and I'm sitting here looking, where's my threads to trim? Um on the bias. You could cut them on the bias. Sometimes they'll do better if they're cut on the bias, but I don't always. Right now I'm trimming threads that from where I stopped earlier. Okay. So we have, I like pull sometimes, but sometimes it's a little too stretchy, especially like I said, a lot of people use the cube as an insulated bag. And so this has Insulbrite and or foam. Okay, so like this has foam completely on the inside. I even have it in the um seam allowance. I don't cut it out. But see here, you can see, yes, this is one I use for storing stuff. But this one has binding that is made of the same fabric. It also helps hide stitches if something goes awry. But this one is actually, instead of Insulbrite, this has foam as the base of the bag. And as you see, the front is one complete piece because I did not want seams on this one. Whereas the one I'm making now has seams as well as the Mario, which I made of 3 different colors of vinyl. So it just depends. But so we have our top attached. Well, before we do anything else, we are going to actually go ahead and bind it. Like I said, I have strips that I've already pre-cut. Now this is waterproof canvas, so sometimes I find this to be a little too thick, and I will trade out for bias binding because it's super thin material. But sometimes I really like it to match. And just case in point, so we have this little Robin Hood bag, and I will tell you, as far as difficulty in sewing, this one takes the cake. The small one, mainly because of the small size. But as you can see, I have waterproof canvas on the inside of this bag completely, binding and everything. Thank you. I have a little frozen bag. If just to show, I do use waterproof canvas a lot in these bags. Just because I say they're the most difficult doesn't mean I don't make them. And this is OtterTex, so this is a more, little thinner. This is from Backstitch Fabrics, but you can also buy this waterproof canvas from Ours Textiles now, and it is one of my favorites. This is the standard, um, well, water resistant canvas, but I love it. It's got a very soft feel to it. It doesn't feel like OtterTex that has like the very smooth, shiny thing, but it's considered water resistant, not waterproof. So what we're gonna do, so I have my big long strip of bias binding. Like I said, you will have some extra That's why but not enough for another thing. So, or for the bottom of the bag. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take and fold. And with waterproof canvas, you can just fold it. You don't have to worry about. This is water resistant canvas. This is the basic water resistant canvas from Iris Textiles, because the person who did Backstitch Fabrics print side, or the vinyls and canvases, was Amber, and she opened her own business, and it's Iris Textiles. They have this one, they have one that's called Slick, which is like a satiny feel that's really nice. They have a Slick Plus, and they have thicker ones, but this is just the basic one. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my folded, and that's where my raw edges are going to be. Iris Textiles, that's correct. She has some awesome stuff. I just recently finished a wallet for there that was made out of the new velvet texture vinyl, and that stuff's awesome. It actually feels like velvet, looks like velvet, but it's vinyl. But so what we're going to do, so we have, if you can see here, I still have my center mark right there. That's where we're going to start our waterproof canvas, or our binding, whichever medium that you want to use for binding. So I am going to, and this is sewn at 1/4 inch, exactly as before. Okay. So we're going to start, and we're just, hold on, let me grab my wallet I made out of the velvet vinyl, and I dropped my binding, but that's besides the point. I can show you all the velvet vinyl. I ordered every colorway, and it's very soft, got a lot of structure to it. So now let's pick up my, okay. So like I said, I've got my folded up. This is my raw edge. So basically, I'm going to stick that in there, and we're going to sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like we sewed the other part. It is, and she had, in the last pre-order, she had multiple colorways of that. So there will be retail once it all comes finished being processed. Okay, so we are going to sew this all the way around. And like I said, as I go around corners, I smush things down. So I always am smushing this out of the way. That's the best thing I can suggest. Okay, so we're going to go around slowly around the corner. And as I said, I squish this back. This is why I say don't pick vinyls that are necessarily going to wrinkle very easily, because they're going to get wrinkled both either in the putting together, or the sewing, or the turning of the bag when we're done. So I am going a little by little around the corner, and you'll find that it's actually easier than attaching the top. So I'm going to make sure that these zipper pulls are actually back over around that corner. Actually, I don't even have to do that. I could just need to make sure I am past. So that way I don't have to go around a corner with those zipper pulls. Just need to make sure I have enough space to go by them. Okay, there we go. Getting everything squished down. Like I said, I just go slow, because it is going around this first corner where the zipper tape matches up with the back. It is thick. So I go slow. Okay. And we'll push that down out of the way. Here we're going slowly over this thing, and we are going to squish down the vinyl yet again, or should I say the body of the bag. Now, one thing versus you'll have some people in certain patterns that you'll leave some of the end off so you can make a perfectly um, conjoined piece of binding. I do not. What we're going to do, that's why you fold it off over the raw edge at the beginning. And that's usually how I do binding because we're going to take the raw edge at the end and overlap it by about an inch. Like I said, that first curve is always the hardest to get around. Sorry, needed to drink a little water. I said it's always the hardest to get around, so I'm just gonna go a few more stitches because you can see my zipper pulls are right here. But I need to be far enough that I have some place to push the zipper pulls. And I will have people ask me, well, why don't you unzip it? Well, I'm not gonna unzip them until I'm ready to attach the fold up the binding. And I'll show you what I mean when I get there. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to lift up my presser foot and move my zipper pulls over to the side. So if you're curious, I am pushing my zipper pulls past the presser foot. Sometimes I have to kind of finagle the bag to get my hand in there to move that presser foot. It is a tight fit sometimes, and some zipper pulls are thicker than others, but once you're past this, then it's a lot easier. And that makes the bottom so much easier because you don't have a zipper you're fighting the whole time because you're like, oh, this makes it a lot easier. All right, so now we're going to, so our, if you want to look, here are our zipper pulls past where we've already sewn. So now we're going to go around our other three sides and meet up with the other. So like I said, I just fold back my body of the bag as I get to where I'm sewing. I don't rush it, don't try to push it or anything like that. I said, and I do binding different than a lot of people, but I've never had any issues with it coming undone or anything like that. Like I said, the biggest thing with this is take your time. If you try to rush it, then you'll have issues. Like I said, make sure your zipper tape is laying flat, that you're not catching anything in some weird seam. Otherwise, your zipper's not going to unzip. And that will be detrimental. And before you put the bottom on, though, we do make sure that it unzips all the way before we attach the bottom. So if you have to take something out, you can. So we are going to push flat as we go around that corner. Okay, and see, I'm not having any skip stitches this time. So we are managing a little easier if we can get these zippers to lay flat as we go around the corner. This is why I said sometimes the pre-made binding is easier because it's thinner. It does stretch a little bit. This water resistant canvas does not have any stretch to it. I can tell you that for sure. But like I said, I've used this. This is what they call ours textiles calls the structured water resistant canvas. But like I said, if you feel like you need to stitch over something, in the case of skip stitches or anything like that, or if you have to take out stitches or anything, go ahead and do it. Unless it's a part that you're necessarily going to see all the time. These stitches right now, they're going on the inside of the binding. Nobody's going to see them. So every stitch does not need to be perfect. Yes, if it's a top stitch, that's one thing. If it's not a top stitch and it's inside the construction of the bag, don't let it stress you out. Okay, so as I said, you go around these corners slowly. The sides go a lot faster because they're straight. But these curves, that's when we have curves, not straight lines, because then zippers don't go around squares so much, they go around curves. So it's a very gradual curve. Thank you, Melody. I don't know how I'm natural, but I'll take your word for it. Okay, so we are go slowly around. I got one last corner to go around. And just because this is for my daughter doesn't mean I take shortcuts or this is hard on hers as I do my own or for an order. And believe me, I have made many cubes for orders. Slacked off some once I actually released the pattern, but still make some from time to time. Well, if you can't be honest, it's hard. Then how are you teaching anybody anything? That's my thought process. Okay, so we go. I never learned by YouTube. I actually learned in a classroom setting to learn how to sew. So, we're getting to the part where we started. So you see where I folded over part. So we're going to go to about an inch past that. So about right here, inch, inch and a half, thereabouts. Okay, we're almost there. Just kind of keeping an eye on where I'm at. Of course, I do my reverse stitch. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off the excess. From a Now this was because it was a roll of water resistant canvas, this was like 54 inches long. So it's longer than so it's about 10 inches longer. So it's usually, let's see, this is a piece about 19 inches. So you would normally have about a 9-inch piece left over, which is really not enough to go start the next bottom, it's better just to have a fresh piece. So I'm going to throw that excess away. If you want to, you could always keep the scraps and make a big long piece of binding that was multi different colors. I've done that before. Makes it look interesting. All right, so if you see, this is where it overlaps. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn all our binding to the top of the bag. This is a time before we sew this binding down. Make sure you've not caught anything important in there, like your zipper tape. I haven't. I will say I've not even. I've gone before and I've caught some weird lump, and so it's good to check. Make sure that you've not got any got weird lump. That's your holes are going to get stuck on when they open. See, there's no lumps or anything like that. So now that you see, we have it pointed to the top. Of course, here's our body of the bag. Here's the top of the bag. What we're going to do is we're going to take it, and I'm going to trim the thread off partially from where we started. So you can see where all my stitching has been at a 1/4 inch. That was my basting line to base the insel braid on. But there's my 1/4 inch seam allowance that I've done all the way around for both attaching the top as well as attaching the binding. And apparently I missed a thread. Right. Anyways. So what we're going to do, you're going to fold it down about a 1/4 of an inch. And then you're going to fold it over, and I will clip this in place and show you what I mean. Now this is where I use clips. This is why I have a whole bunch of clips sitting here. And I will clip this side and then I'll show you what I'm doing. So if you can see, there's the raw edge right here. I fold it down basically to where it meets. And if you fold it down, it covers up that seam allowance. Now, if you've taken a deeper seam allowance than you meant to, don't worry so much about getting in those corners right now. Just kind of fold it under, but just do it around the sides because it will kind of fall as it needs to. But I do clip it all the way around. Now, your thickest part will be where you overlapped at the back. And I will turn the camera around so you can see what I'm doing. Just a little better. So just to show you, and see, you see I kind of trained it here, but I'm just going slowly but surely around. And so I just go and fold that down. It meets basically where it meets at the top. So I will actually do that and fold it over. That I don't worry too much about getting it around the corner because it's going to pop off if you put it right at the corner. So I go like right up next to the corner, and then I'll do right up next to the corner on the other side as well. And that's just more to hold it in place. So I do like 4 or 5 clips all the way around each side. Just like I said, to hold it in place. And then we're going to sew this down with an 1/8 of an inch top stitch. Put one more clip right here. It's wanting to finagle its way off. All right. Like I said, I just clip all the way around. Like I said, on the corners, I just kind of train it. I said, and we will do the bottom next week and we'll go over how to do the binding again, just so you can see it. So you don't feel like you're missing anything. It is a little different with the bottom versus the top because you don't have zipper pulls or zipper tape, which is more fiddly than the actual vinyl. Your bottom's a little thicker because you're going through all the layers of both the back and the bottom. So as you can see, we're on to our last corner. Like I said, I kind of trained that. Okay, just so you can see, I kind of have it trained. And I usually use a stiletto as I'm sewing this. I'm not exactly sure where mine is at the moment, so you're going to see me maybe um, struggle a little. All right, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to sew starting at the back. And what we're going to do, once we get past that first corner, we're actually going to unzip it. And that makes it a whole lot easier to sew the top stitch. It's better to show you than to try to tell you. So I'll move you back to the thing. Sorry, a little bit of a water break. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start. And as you can see, I'm starting basically an eighth of an inch from the edge of the fold. That's my top stitch. That will be, should be equal. It's going to hide your stitch and everything like that. Oh, clips are awesome. That's my thought process. I will say for a long time, because I sewed clothes long before I did bags, and clips would have been helpful in some of those clothing things. And so I am going to make sure I don't have any skip stitches in this case, mainly because you're more likely to see these stitches. You're not going to see them from the outside of the bag, but you will see them from the inside of the bag. So I still try to be a little neater here and don't have my stiletto, but a lot of times I use my staple remover as a way to push down the material to hold it in place as it stitches. Basically, I just want a non-pointed. My seam ripper actually has a stiletto, but it's too pointed for me. I like the kind of dull end that the staple remover has to do that. Plus, it has a lot more surface area. It holds it down pretty good. I just have to make sure, since it is metal, not to go over it. Ask how I know about that. So we are going to, so like I said, corners can be tricky, but as you see, I am holding it down. But if I were to put a clip here in the first part, then what would happen, and of course my zipper pulls are all the way on the other side and I want them on this side. So that I can unzip that top. I will say it makes top stitching the sucker a lot easier. And this is also why you do the top versus the bottom first. Because can you imagine trying to attach all this with the zipper pulls, moving them around with not being able to reach your hand in the bottom of the bag? Now, see, we don't need to move both zipper pulls. I just need to move one because, like I said, we're going to open this up So I kind of just want to move this a little bit closer to where I'm sewing, but I have to kind of get past that first little curve before I can open my zipper all the way. So we're just get around this curve, take our time, no rush. Okay, and I will show you right now. So right now you see me trying to manhandle this whole bag through here and squish it and everything like that. So I'm gonna go a couple more stitches, and you can. I have many times. So I'm past that first little curve, and you see, look how flat I can lay it now that the zipper is completely open. See, here's my zipper pull back here. I've moved it all the way open, and look how flat that makes, and how much easier that is to sew now that it's completely flat. And this is the reason why we unzip it as we sew our binding. So the biggest thing was when you're coming around these corners, this is the only reason why it's good to have it still zipped up, is because now if you see that corner, that zipper tape could get under my stitching. So what you have to make sure when you're coming around those corners that it lays flat, is pushed underneath, so that it's not going to get caught and stitched in to your binding basically. And can you believe I had only, when I designed this bag, I'd only been sewing binding for a couple bags. I had been sewing the Magdalena and from Ora Rosa Patterns. That's where I first got comfortable sewing binding. I don't sew binding the same way they do now, well, the same way that Alexis from Ora Rosa sews hers, but I do it simmer. That's where I got my start sewing binding for bags. So if you're ever confused as to how she does it, is great. And she uses the bias binding, usually tells you exactly the width or the length you need. I love hers, especially like the Catalina bag and the um Magdalena. I've made many Magdalena bags, all different shapes. I've made lots of Pokemon out of the Magdalena bags. I made my daughter a Jigglypuff and my sister-in-law a Togepi. Now I doubt it's going to be a Magdalena, but I'm going to make myself hopefully this year, a Psyduck Pokemon bag. We'll see what happens. So like I said, we're just going around. I pull out clips as I get to them. And like I said, we are going right at the edge of the fold. And since, like I said, since I use a narrow foot, then because I use a narrow foot, then what happens is that I am sewing at an 1/8 inch top stitch. Okay. See, we're getting to the next corner, so we need to make sure to put our zipper tape where it's not going to get sewn into the binding that we're sewing. That's very important so that you're not catching your zipper tape as you zip. And I said, you're going to go, by the time you get to the bottom, you're going to go, oh, this is a lot simpler than the top. And in a way, the bottom is simpler. You are just attaching it. but you're not having to move. Um, it will be thicker, but you don't have to move a zipper out of the way or anything like that. And you don't have to be quite as careful with your top stitching in the bottom because once the bag's turned right side out, it's hard to see down in the bottom of that bag. Your top is going to be more likely to see the top stitch that I'm doing right now. Okay, so like I said, I am pushing my zipper tape under as I go around the corner, just so I don't have some weird lump in my zipper tape, so that it will unzip cleanly. So as you see, I actually lay on that bag the entire time. Apparently, I turned off my light. Uh, ah, I unplugged my light. We won't talk about that. There we go. I was like, all of a sudden it got dark. All right, so we're going around the corner. Amazing what a little bit of extra light does to help you get around things. So this is when it gets a little more wonky because it's up against me, as you can see. We're gonna take our time going around. It's just strangely quiet in my sewing room. I've been running an embroidery machine most of the day. And I don't think y'all want to hear that, so I stopped that before, so it seems strangely quiet. I'm getting ready for a big festival next weekend, and I'll do a lot of embroidered um key fobs. So as you can see, oh, it's my favorite foot melody. That's what I keep on most of the time. So we're getting to the other zipper pull, so you can see it right there. So it will get kind of bulky right here. We just have to watch that you don't hit metal. I have hit my zipper pull through my binding before. So that's one thing I will do is I will reach in here and make sure the zipper pull is out of the way while I'm stitching. That's one reason around that first corner I leave it zipped so that where it's the most fiddly, it's not going to cause me issues. At this point, I could zip it back up if I wanted to, but I usually don't. So, so this is where I'm more apt to hit my stiletto, staple remover, whatever I'm using to hold this down, because I am literally holding it down to the last moment to go around this last corner because I said really thick because you're going around with that zipper pull right there. So you're trying to make sure you don't hit it or anything like that. You can hear as I go around that thick part. Oh, I love it. I sew a lot of my doll clothing on here except for zipper buttonholes. I either use my Singer backup or my daughter's baby lock to sew buttonholes. So, but everything else about gets sewn on here. I just have to remember to change out needles for the type of thing I'm sewing. So we are almost at the end. So you can see kind of this is where I started. We're getting ready to go over the biggest hump, which is where the two pieces of water resistant canvas overlap. A lot of times, because this is so thick, I will actually hand turn the wheel just to make sure it catches, since it is so thick. Less likely I'm going to have skip stitches. As a way, if you don't have a hump jumper that you want to get over really thick seams, you can hand crank it. I do that often enough. Takes a little more time, but it's more likely to catch through all the layers than if you go fast, and less likely you have to go back and deal with skip stitches. I'm almost through that. We are right at, if you can see, this is right where my two are overlapping right here. And then I just give it about an inch here to sew, and then I'm done, at least with the top. So like I said, I will do a hand crank just to go these last like 2 inches, and then I'll do my reverse stitches. There's less likely I'm gonna have skip stitches or anything like that. Okay. Okay. Now that that is done, I will trim excess threads. Just so you can see, there is my binding. You want to look on the other side, there's the binding as well. Okay, so just to show you, I'm going to turn it right side out, and I always do this when I'm finishing the top. And the reason is, let's see, is to make sure that it zips and unzips. The first time you do this, it will be a little tight because you see the bulk of your corner. So you kind of have to train it down the first time. After that first time, it should zip around with no problem. So it's basically just going around that corner. And we have our top. And see, now it's very square. I think we'll wait to do the handle until next week, mainly being that I've already gone about 10 minutes more than we do. But just to show you, so that's the full outside. That's the inside. So you can see it. And I will unzip it to show you yet again. You see it unzips without an issue. So no problems. There's the inside. And we will pick up the, I will go ahead and turn it back right side out again, or wrong side out again. Because the next thing we do is we will actually put the handle on the top and then the bottom, and we're done. And bind it, of course. But I will see y'all again next week, and hope y'all have a good night and a good rest of the week.